Welcome, everybody. My name is Brendan Myers, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect here at AWS.
And I'm Ikram Amit, and I'm the head of architecture at Illuvium.
One of the coolest things about my job is that I get to work with startups. And with startups, innovation is at the core of what they do. Digital assets is an area that has seen rapid innovation over the last few years. So today, it's my pleasure to hear from Itamar as he takes us through the Illuvium journey. Illuvium built an awesome game. They're a AAA gaming studio and AWS customer. They built a great customer experience and they sold in-game plots of land. So they sold digital assets. And they did that at scale. And not to give too much of Itamar's talk away, but when I say scale, what I mean is they, over 72 hours, sold 20,000 digital assets for $72 million. It's an awesome story, and I can't wait for everyone to hear it. But my job today is to make sure we all understand what digital assets are, and make sure everyone's on the same page. So what will we cover today? Right? We'll talk about what digital assets are and what digital asset platforms are. So like all good technology, the terminology is fluid and changes. And so what I'll do is give you a concrete definition you can use when you talk to customers about digital assets. We'll have a look at the benefits of digital assets and why you might consider using them if you're not already using them. Digital assets come with their own unique set of challenges, and it's worth being aware of them and understanding how, when you build your solution on AWS, you can solve for these challenges. So we'll cover those. And finally, we'll hear from Illuvium, and we'll hear about that awesome land sale. So firstly, what are digital assets? The name gives it away a little bit. A digital asset is a digital good. It's something that exists in digital form only. But there's a clear distinction between something that is digital, so we have an asset that is digital, and a digital asset, right? So a digital asset has an associated record of ownership, right? So with digital assets, there's a strong concept of ownership and permissions and access rights. So this record of ownership dictates what a certain party or parties can do with this asset, like whether they can view it, whether they can share it, whether they can transfer it, modify it, etc. Right? So the three questions you can ask yourself if you're trying to decide whether something is a digital asset or should be a digital asset is, do I care who has access to it? Do I care how it's managed? And does it have value to someone else? So I'll give you two examples, something that is a digital asset and something that isn't, just to make it really concrete. So firstly, the one that isn't. Right, my nephew, he's drawn this beautiful picture of my family. It's in crayon, and I've taken a photo of it with my phone, so I have a digital copy of it. Right, do I care who has access? I do not care who has access. If anyone wants to hit me up afterwards for a copy, I'm more than happy to give you a copy of it. Do I care how it's managed? No, you can share it freely, you can modify it, you can delete it, you can do whatever you like with it. It doesn't bother me. And does it have value to somebody else? Don't tell my nephew. It's just between you and me. Like, we're all close friends here. It has value to no one. It barely has value to me, let alone someone else. Right. So something that is a digital asset. Let's say I have made a film. I'm a studio or I'm a filmmaker, and I've made a film, and I want to make it available through a streaming media platform. So do I care who has access? Yes, I want subscribers, someone who's paid me for access to be able to view it. Do I care how it's managed? I absolutely care how it's managed. Right? I want to make sure that users can not necessarily transfer the ownership of it. I want to make sure they can, maybe get a refund if they only watch a certain amount of the film. Maybe I only want them to be able to watch it on certain applications. So I care how it's managed. Right, and does it have value to somebody else? Yeah, it's a really cool film. Like, people will pay to see it. So do I care who has access? Do I care how it's managed? And does it have value to someone else? Are the three things you need to consider whether something should be a digital asset or whether something is a digital asset. So the digital good itself can live in traditional platforms, like traditional object storage solutions. The record of ownership, though, needs to be managed by a digital asset platform. And so a digital asset platform does three key things with these records of ownership. Right? Firstly, it allows us to create a record of ownership. And so this could be an open platform, depending on which digital asset platform we're using. We may have built our own. We may, which is what is commonly done, be using a third-party platform. And so we need to be able to create assets on that platform. And so it might just be a certain select few parties that can create assets. Maybe the platform owners can do that. Or maybe it's open for everyone to be able to create assets. But there needs to be a way to create those records of ownership. We need to manage the life cycle of those assets and those records of ownership, right? So once it's created, maybe we need to modify the data. Maybe we need to transfer the asset to somebody else. Not all assets are designed to live forever either. So we need a way to decommission the asset. Right? And so that management lifecycle could be something that's quite simple in terms of just transferring, updating, and removing assets, or it could be more complicated. It will depend on your use case. And finally, we need a way to share these records of ownership. And so when we say share, what we're talking about is making that data available. We're making it viewable. Otherwise, you just have a closed system, and that's not particularly useful to anyone. Right? And so when we talk about sharing data or making data visible, maybe, depending on your use case, you make all that data visible. So you have an asset, and anyone can see who currently owns it, what they paid for it, who's owned it in the past, what other assets are in the same class. Maybe that is all visible, or maybe only a select portion of that data is available. So a good example of where you would limit access to data is a motor vehicle registry. So if I'm buying a vehicle, I can look up a vehicle registration and I can see whether it's registered or not. And maybe there's a little bit of history around any write-offs or anything. Whereas law enforcement get a much richer picture. Right? They can go and see who has owned the vehicle in the past, their name, their address, etc. But we need a way to share that data and a way to potentially limit it. And it will depend on your use case. So these platforms, these digital asset platforms, are built in one of two ways. They follow two models, right? The centralized model or the decentralized model. So the centralized model is where we trust a central entity to manage those records of ownership for us, to provide us access, to secure them, to ensure there's durability and backups and everything else that goes along with that. So in the case of the motor vehicle registry, it'd be a government entity would manage that digital asset platform on behalf of its citizens, right? That would be a centralized model. Whereas in the decentralized model, multiple parties hold a copy of that data and check each other's work to make sure transactions and activity on that network are valid. So this is commonly associated with blockchains, which most people probably have heard of by this point. So each party maintains a copy of the data and they check each other's transactions. And what that means is basically that I can't come along and transfer or modify or act on an asset that I don't own. It's important to note, though, that in that decentralized model, we commonly associate that with public blockchains where they're open for anyone to come and build on. But it's not always the case. You can actually have private and permissioned blockchains if you have multiple parties that want to interact in this manner, but don't necessarily want the platform open to the entire world. So you can have private and permissioned blockchains. So why would you consider digital assets, and what are some of the benefits of digital assets? So firstly, if we look at it from the user's point of view, in the past, you haven't been able to own digital assets in the true sense. You haven't been able to own digital goods in the true sense of own, right? Your access to that asset has been limited by the system that gave you access in the first place. So if terms of service changed or a service shut down, you may lose access to that asset. Right? But with digital assets and that separate record of ownership, you know what your permissions are and what rights you have to a digital good before you purchase it, and those rights cannot be revoked afterwards. So this allows you to own a digital good in the true sense of the word own. There are additional benefits to this as well. So if I own a digital asset and I no longer need it, I no longer want it, in the past, it's been tricky to dispose of that asset, right? Usually what happens is you just forget about it and you just never use it again. But now with digital assets, you can sell that, you can on-sell that asset on a third-party marketplace. So I can recoup some of my initial outlay, or if the asset is increased in price, I can potentially make a profit. For application builders, it allows you to provide something of value to your customers, so something desirable for users, right? Because you're providing truly ownable digital goods. You can also recognize digital assets that have been created by a separate entity, and you can verify they're authentic. So say, for example, I have some platform and I want to offer Illuvium users, so someone who owns some Illuvium land, I want to offer them some discount on my platform. I can recognize those Illuvium assets within my system, and I can be sure that they're authentic and they aren't counterfeit. And so I can be part of that ecosystem and not worry about any counterfeit or any nefarious actors. And I said ecosystem a few times. That's the third piece we need to consider, right? There's a rich ecosystem that has sprung up around different digital asset platforms, especially in public blockchain. It's a rich area of innovation. And so there are builders out there building tools that you can take advantage of and your users can take advantage of. And all you need to do is provide digital assets. So a really great example of this are things like third-party marketplaces, right? So if I offer digital assets in my system, they can be traded, depending on the digital asset platform I'm using, they can be traded on these open marketplaces. So they can be traded for money. They can be traded with digital assets of different classes, which until this point has been a tricky integration problem. And they can even be loaned out. Right? There are so many use cases that I couldn't name them all here, but it's a super interesting area and an area with active innovation at the moment. And by offering digital assets to your users, they can take advantage of these ecosystem benefits. But there are some unique challenges that come with working with digital assets. Right? The first is that usage is unpredictable and uneven. So when we talk about unpredictable usage, we're talking about spikes in traffic. Right? So there are sometimes we know when the spike will happen. Like when we have a sale event, we're expecting a spike in traffic. But let's say, for example, that an asset that I've made available, like a rare asset, has just been sold for a record price. I don't have any control over when that asset will be sold. I might be unaware that it was even for sale in the first place. And that asset being sold for a record price would drive a lot of users to view that asset. Right? So they might want to view how much the asset was sold for, who bought it, what is the asset actually? Like, is it a video? Is it an image? Is it an in-game asset? That will drive a lot of traffic to my site, and I'm not necessarily aware ahead of time of when those spikes will be. And when we talk about uneven traffic, we're talking about the difference between read-heavy traffic and write-heavy traffic. So in the case where an asset has been sold for a record price, and people are coming along to view that asset and just to see who bought it and how much, et cetera, that's read-heavy traffic. But likewise, you potentially could see write-heavy traffic if a lot of users want to buy an asset in that same class. There's no way to know ahead of time whether that will be the case. And different parts of your application will scale differently. And so when we talk about uneven traffic, we need to be aware of the fact that traffic will happen, all these spikes will happen without you knowing ahead of time that they will happen. And they could be read heavy, they could be write heavy, or they could be both. There's no way to predict that. Managing state across distributed systems is hard. So usually you'll use a third-party digital asset platform, and you'll have your application built on top of that, and you may have the digital goods stored in a separate object storage somewhere else, and potentially you'll have reporting and other systems that all work together, but they're distributed systems. And one of the challenges with digital asset platforms is that once you've made a request for some action, so I may be sending something to Itamar, right, that doesn't necessarily happen straight away. There's some delay between me requesting that action and that action happening. Right, so we need to be aware of that. So if you have a user at your website, they're beautifully impatient, right? They've clicked the button to buy an asset. You need to be aware of when that asset transaction has actually gone through, so you can update the state in every system that you have. Because we want to make sure that we're maintaining that state across all those systems, and it's as responsive as possible to user requests. And lastly, everything fails all the time. So if you've ever seen a talk by our CTO, Werner Vogels, he loves saying this, and it's true. Everything fails all the time. But what does this actually mean? What this means is that we shouldn't try to build things that never ever fail. Right? That's a really, 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 really hard challenge. What we should do is we should build systems that are tolerant to fault. So in the case that when something goes wrong and things go wrong, that we're able to recover and get back to a known good state. And considering that we're working with third-party platforms and we have a distributed system and potentially a bit of complexity in what we've built, we want to make sure that we've built a system that is very tolerant to fault. Because the last thing you want is for a user or a group of users to put through an order or a purchase for a number of digital assets, have those orders in flight, something breaks, and then not be able to recover from that. That's a very bad user experience. So we want to make sure that we're building resilient systems. This is where serverless and event-driven architectures for digital assets comes in. Serverless is quite a good fit for digital asset products. Firstly, for traffic spikes, we can look at AWS Lambda. Right? So it takes care of the undifferentiated heavy lifting around scaling out and scaling in response to code execution requests. So it can scale in down to a handful of requests a day and out to hundreds of thousands per second. For uneven traffic, we want to leverage managed services. So we look at things like Amazon API Gateway for our API layer, Amazon S3 for our object storage, and Amazon DynamoDB for our NoSQL databases. We want different parts of our application to scale differently and separately, and we want, we don't want to be managing that ourselves. We want to leverage managed services. For external events, we want to make sure we build systems that respond immediately to outside state changes. So we've sent a request to transact on a digital asset platform. We want to make sure our internal state is updated as soon as possible. And so we can leverage services like Amazon Event Bridge for receiving those events. And if we have complicated workflows where potentially there are, if I've transferred an asset, I need permissions revoked on certain systems, and that could be quite a complicated workflow. We can leverage AWS step functions to orchestrate that for us. And finally, handling failures. We can look at services like Amazon Simple Queue service. So in the case of a failure, we can store events and we can redrive them later to get back to a known good state. And so now, I think we're all on the same page as far as digital assets go. And it's my absolute pleasure to welcome to the stage Itamar to take us through the Illuvium land sale story.
So video now. Okay, so now that hopefully you're all impressed by our visuals, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening behind the scenes. So I want to talk to you about our land sale. Again, very intense. We sold 20,000 objects and we raised $72 million. And I just want to tell you about how we did that. So what is Illuvium? Illuvium is a decentralized AAA video game studio building the world's first interoperable blockchain game universe, including an open world exploration game, an industrial city building game, and an auto battler, all on the Ethereum blockchain. So unlike traditional gaming, in which players play the game, and when they leave everything behind, in Illuvium, the players get to keep what they earned in-game because it's all in the form of digital assets. These assets are being used across our entire range of games. And for example, one of the asset classes that we use are in-game lands. Owning a plot of land allows you to use it in our city builder to build buildings on it, which generate resources. And some of these are themselves digital assets, which can be used in any other game in our universe. Now, the concept of lands was introduced in 2021 because a lot of other people were doing it. You might have seen popular digital asset sales such as the Bored Apes Yacht Club, the Sandbox, and Decentraland all had very successful digital asset sales, and we wanted in on the hype. So we decided that we're going to have a land sale. Now, looking around at what other people did, we decided we're going to run an auction because it had quite a few pros. It was great for community building. At this point, we're still pre-launch. We don't even have a beta of our game out. And having a very active sale where people can actively participate, actively buy, was something that was great for our community. It was good for marketing. It generated hype. It let people know that we're around. And it just allowed us to be featured in some news articles. It was great for trust. Again, no product out yet at this point. And having a project out, a sale, something to showcase to our community that we are able to deliver on our promises was great. And lastly, funding. Obviously, selling stuff for a startup is important because you get some runway, which is never a bad thing. Now, it's important to understand just for concept that at this point in time, Illuvium has a very big community. We have 250,000 active players on our Discord server. So we knew there's going to be a lot of interest in this land sale. We knew there's going to be a lot of participation. So we were like, okay, if we need to support all these players trying to buy lands, what do we need to do? And so let me tell you what other people did first, and then what we did to not do that. So back in the day, this is roughly what things looked like. We had our users interacting with a website, and this website was just a very thin proxy around the blockchain. So the land sale the website might display some bids or some items for sale, but it would all actually be stored on the blockchain itself. The blockchain in this case is both the database and the server. That's where the state is stored. That's where all the items for sale, all the current auctions, all the current bid, payments are made directly to the blockchain. Now, the problem with this, it works. People did it. People made money. But it doesn't scale very well. So firstly, the front end If you haven't set it up correctly, despite being a simple web page, these things crash under load. Transaction might just take a while to load. Because it displays some form of data from the blockchain, it might not be in sync, and then the players might end up trying to place a bid on an item where a bid is already higher, or try and buy an item which is already being purchased by someone else. And the blockchain itself is even more complex when it comes to handling load. So it's important to understand that every single time that there is a write operation against the blockchain, someone pays for it. And for example, placing a bid, that's a write operation. And it doesn't matter whether this bid was successful or not. If someone tried writing, they'll pay money. When there are a lot of people trying to place bids at once, especially based on a bad website that might display out-of-date information, lots of people are placing bids. These bids are becoming increasingly more expensive because there is a lot of contention happening. And whenever a bid is attempted to be placed, someone pays money. And if there are lots of people trying to place bids, they might be paying so much for these bids, so much that it's actually higher than the cost of the item they're trying to bid on. And in some of these cases, the bid doesn't even go through. So overall, really, really poor experience for our players. And we want to avoid this. So we set up some very simple goals. First and foremost, great customer experience. Again, a big part of this sale is to ensure that our community believes in us, in what we can do. So we want to ensure that they have a great experience and go, yeah, these guys, we believe in them. They can do what they set up to do. In terms of more technical requirements, we really want it to be cost effective. We're a startup at this point in time. We have a small team, and we need to use it wisely. So this means both develop fast, develop effectively, and ideally not pay a lot for maintenance and SREs. It has to be resilient to distributed system issues. Again, the blockchain has quite a few issues when it comes to syncing with other systems, and we did not want to carry these issues across to our player base. We really wanted to build something which is event-driven. The blockchain is very much event-driven. It can be thought of as a ledger, and us not leveraging that would be just a shame. Obviously, highly scalable, and it's important to understand we're not only talking about scaling out in this case, right? We know we're expecting a lot of traffic. We need to not crash and burn under it, but also we're planning on distributed our assets in batches. So when nothing is actively on sale, we expect to see a whole lot less people on our website, which means we can scale in and just capitalize on that lack of traffic to save costs. And lastly, durable. Obviously, blockchain is not the most reliable tech out there. We want to ensure that our customers don't suffer because of it. And the solution for this was quite simple. Firstly, we decided to run what's called a reverse auction. So in a normal auction, the participant would place bids until no one is willing to place a highest bid than the current highest price, and that participant would be the winner of the auction. In a reverse auction, rather, the item is given a price, and this price constantly drops until someone is willing to place a bid and buy it at the current price. Secondly, we decided to use a blockchain abstraction provider. We picked Immutable X, which allowed us to save a lot of cost, both for us and for our customers, by providing an abstraction layer in front of the blockchain. And of course, we went serverless because it provides all the technical benefits that we needed here. So what did we actually end up building? Again, starting with our users, which are kind of important. We build a simple front end hosted through Amazon CloudFront as a CDN, through API Gateway, invoking AWS Lambda, which fetched data from Dynamo. Now, this data was a materialized view of what was on the blockchain, because the blockchain itself is not very easily queryable. Again, think of a ledger. Getting particular information about a particular item is not easy, so we ensure that we have data in there. We had the blockchain itself, which we don't want to, as much as we want to abstract on top of it, we still needed to have it. The customers still placed bids against the blockchain. But when they did, an event was emitted, and it was pushed to AWS Lambda. And from Lambda, the updated state of things was pushed to DynamoDB. And of course, once something happened in Dynamo, we used the Dynamo stream, picked up by yet another Lambda, to push information to our abstraction API. Now, this worked. This worked really well. We made our $70 million US. We sold almost every single asset. Only 31 remained out of 20,000, which is great. And at the peak, we were able to have 10,000 Lambda invocations per minute. In terms of non-technical, we got our news coverage both in our ecosystem and mainstream, which was really good. Our customers were really happy. We had great sentiment and great feedback. And the best part is this was cost-effective development. The website is still up and running. We can reuse it if we need for another sale. And a lot of the modules that we build are still reused right now by other services. So yeah, great success. I'll now hand you back to Brendan to wrap us up.
Oh, thank you, Itamar. So what did we cover today? Right, we defined some common terms around digital assets. So we need to remember those three key things. Do I care who has access? Do I care how it's managed? Does it have value to someone else? And with digital asset platforms, they allow us to create, manage, and share data, all those records of ownership. And there's those two models, the centralized model and the decentralized model. We had a look at why serverless and event-driven architectures are a good idea when dealing with digital assets. And then we heard from Illuvium around how they flawlessly executed that land sale. So where can you find out more information? So I'll leave the slide with some QR codes there. You can hear from the Illuvium co-founder, Kieran Warwick, around how Illuvium was founded. That's on $1 Billion Napkin. That's a super interesting story. There's also, if you want a technical deep dive into more of what Itamar was talking about with that land sale, there's a great blog post from Illuvium, Say No to the Gas Wars, that I recommend checking out. If you want to learn more about event-driven architectures, there's a link there. There's some information on the AWS website. And if you want to learn more about blockchain and digital assets, there's a great talk from our ASEAN Summit as well. I definitely recommend checking out Skill Builder so you can join millions of other active learners. There's some great courses there, especially around event-driven architectures and serverless and gaming as well. So I highly recommend jumping onto Skill Builder and checking that out. Finally, thank you very much for coming to our session today. I hope everyone got something great out of it. Once again, thank you everyone and enjoy the rest of Summit.